Podcast Answer Man, episode number 194.
Entertaining, educational, and encouraging content that makes a difference. This is GSPN.TV. Join the community.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Podcast Answer Man. My name is Cliff Ravenscraft, and this is the podcast about podcasting. We are here each and every week to help you get the answers to the questions that you have that could help you take your show to the next level. It doesn't matter if you're a brand new podcaster or a podcaster that's been podcasting since podcasting began. There's no doubt that even I and everyone else out there can always do something to take our shows to that next level. And my friends, today I have at least 6 of your questions coming in on the voicemail feedback hotline. And so we are going to jump right into things. And I think so. I could tell you what all we're going to cover, but I think everything is going to be so good that you're going to want to just listen to the whole thing. So let's jump right into it with our first question of the day coming in from George.
Hi Cliff, this is George Edwards calling from the UK for the podcast Answer Man. I was just wondering about upgrading equipment. Say for instance you've bought a really cheap starter setup and you have a set budget to upgrade it. Is it going to be better to buy, say, a Heil mic, or to upgrade your whole system just a little bit? If you're using a very low quality setup, is it worth getting a Heil, or will it just simply not be making the most of the mic? Again, thank you so much for your awesome content, and I'm a big fan of the new Plus membership. Thanks again, George.
George, thank you very much for the question. And my friend, let me tell you, I remember exactly where I sat the day that question was on my lips, and the person that I asked that question to. I mean, and I'm not kidding you when I said it's almost word for word. I actually had the opportunity to talk with Leo Laporte, who is basically somebody that I look up to very highly. And I have him up on a little podcasting pedestal. If you've been a long-time listener, you know that. So, you know, the higher he is, the farther he has that he can fall. But anyway, I remember asking him that. And let me explain to you my starter setup, if you will. Or technically, it depends on what your starter setup is. Now, if your starter setup is, you know, an inexpensive microphone and an inexpensive mixer, but as long as those are XLR connectors on your mixer, you can take in the little mic jack that has the 3 prongs on it. If you have a mixer that has XLR ports and you're using a microphone, it doesn't matter if you're using condenser mics, dynamic mic, whatever the case may be. Now, if that's what you mean when you say starter setup, then I am going to tell you the answer to your question. Should I upgrade, my mixer first and then do the microphone? Because the question is, if I get this Heil microphone, is this little tiny inky dinky mixer going to really, let it shine, to let it do its thing? Or am I going to spend all my money on this microphone and it not really help anything because I'm still dealing with that little stuff? So the answer to your question is I'm going to give you the same exact advice that I got from Leo Laporte. And Leo Laporte said to me, and I'm not sure if it's word for word, he said, Cliff, you want to go out and get the Heil PR-40 microphone. Your microphone is the most important piece of equipment in your podcasting setup. And of course, what I learned through playing around and stuff like that is that the mixer, it doesn't matter if you have a $50 Behringer mixer with one XLR input and a couple of line ins for some maybe computer audio or something like that to come in, or if you have the Mackie 1402 VLZ3 mixer, which costs a couple $100 like the one that I have. It does not matter. My Heil PR-40 plugged into my Mackie mixer, going straight into my Edirol recorder, would sound exactly the same. Well, okay, I'm going to give you a caveat where that might be different, but it's going to be pretty much exactly the same as if I plugged it into a $45 Behringer 1 XLR input mixer. It's practically going to sound the same. Now, there is one component in there that really is going to make a difference, and that is, and it's a slight difference. It's called your preamp. So it's what takes your voice and amplifies it. So some preamps are going to sound a little warmer and more rounded than maybe say a cheaper preamp. But to be honest with you, I've gone both ways on my Heils, because when I go out on the road, I do take my Heils with me. I take my boom microphone arms with the C clamps, and I take my Heil PR-40s and put them in a case and pack all that stuff up, and I take my little $65 Behringer mixer and I hit the road. And when I record those shows, they don't sound any different. I mean, practically they don't sound any different than when I have those microphones plugged into my big old mixer here in the studio. So my answer to you, George, and to everybody else out there that might be wondering the same thing, as long as you have a mixer that's already accepting an XLR port and you're looking to upgrade either your mixer and overall gear just a little bit, or just go ahead and splurge a little bit on the microphone, I think if you splurge on the microphone, you'll be happy with your new and improved sound until you're able to even save up more money to kind of expand the rest of your equipment out. So, George, I hope that was helpful to you, and we're going to next move on to Dave Foster from down in Franklin, Tennessee. Dave, take it away.
Hey, Cliff, this is Dave Foster from Nashville and the David and Paula Show with a question. Hey, I know that you are a big thesis theme guy, and I bought your tutorial, which is very well worth it, by the way. But I've been seeing a lot of other websites that have the standard or the standard 2 theme, something like that. Just wondered if you've ever thought about the comparison between the two. Still a big thesis theme fan. And how about a place like Squarespace that you hear an awful lot about today? Just thought I'd ask, see what your opinion is. By the way, I've bought several of your digital products. Love them, love them, love them. They've been very practical and incredibly great value. So keep up the great work, buddy. Appreciate you.
David, thank you very much. And by the way, I look forward to seeing you in about 2 weeks on the No More Mondays cruise. That's right. David and his wife, Paula, are going to be speakers on the cruise with myself and Dan Miller and a couple other folks, and it's going to be a huge blast. And David, I am looking forward to that time. So I will see you there. Now, to your question here, have I ever heard, first and foremost, I have never heard of the standard or standard 2 theme. That doesn't speak anything for that theme or against it. I just have never heard of it. There are literally thousands upon thousands of WordPress themes out there. Obviously, WordPress comes with its own standard default theme. It's not the standard theme that probably you're talking about, but it comes with a default theme. And when they came out with version 3.0, the theme that comes by default is a lot more customizable, at least in the header area and the nav menu and all that other stuff, which is really nice. To be honest with you, because I've never really liked the previous versions of the default theme, I never even gave the new default theme even a chance. I don't even know. I've not even played around with it because I've found other themes that have been, that I've invested a great amount of time in learning how to do the things that I would want to do in those themes. Now, for me, for the longest time, this meant I was using a Revolution theme, which then turned into Studio Press. Actually, I purchased a developer's kit for them because I have so many different websites. I always want to get the license that allows me to use it on all my sites. It's a little bit more expensive, but it's worth it for somebody like me. And also it allows me to install on customer sites at a lower cost than if they had to pay for it themselves, which is kind of nice. But to get back to the deal here, when I learned the Revolution theme, it took me a couple weeks to really get around inside of there to figure out how to tinker and change some colors here and how to do this there. And while I am not a PHP programmer and I know very little about CSS, custom style sheets, I was able to get in there with Revolution Pro, which was used to be my favorite theme, and I really learned how to customize a lot of things. And I got so good at it that I really didn't want to look into any other themes. And I can't remember why. Oh, I do remember why. I heard somebody talking about the thesis theme, and I did a search on the internet about the thesis theme, and I saw the video over there that talked about, let me show you real quick in 5 minutes how we can make a site look from this to this. And then they walked you through and showed you, it's like, oh, wow, you can do that. Wow, you don't even have to play around with CSS and all this other stuff. And so I was enticed to check out the thesis theme. Now, I'll tell you, thesis theme is extremely easy to use, especially if you don't know any PHP code or CSS. And I know enough to do the things I'd want, but with thesis, you don't have to know anything. Now, of course, they upgraded Studio Press, and a lot of these premium themes all have this built-in functionality where pretty much you don't need to know anything about any kind of coding. You just need to go in and tell it what colors you want for all of the different little elements. So a lot of themes are coming up with this, and I don't know, but the standard and the standard 2 themes may even be in that category. So your question is, would I ever be interested in kind of comparing those? To be honest with you, no. Not really. And the reason why is not because I'm obstinate and that well, gosh, you're a consultant. Shouldn't you know a little bit more about some other options that are out there for your clients? Yeah, I guess that could be one argument. But a lot of my clients over the years, and I've been consulting now for 4.5 years, 5 years, kind of like just part-time and playing around with things. But then, I've been doing this full-time as my only source of income. Well, my career, it's not my only source of income, consulting, because I have content that I produce, and that brings in some income as well, and so do the webinars and digital products and stuff. But you get what I'm saying. I've been consulting now for 3 years as a career. And in all of my experience, what people have wanted from me is not for me to have a knowledge of everything that's out there so that they know all the options. Everybody so far has wanted to know, hey, Cliff, I see that you're doing this. Can you show, since you already found something that works, can you tell me how I can get that to work for me? And, I say that. I just want to say that, I am learning new things. But to answer your question, a new theme is not one of them right now. And my moving from Studio Press over to Thesis, I believe, was actually that step that I just told you that I'm not really willing to do right now. Now, here's the situation. I was almost ready to move away from Thesis and go find something new about, I don't know if it was 5 or 6 months ago, when Chris, I think, is it Pearson or McPherson? Anyway, the creator of Thesis kind of fell out of favor with Matt Mullenweg, the guy who created and came up with the idea of WordPress. And there was a big, huge argument and fight between these guys. It was very public over the open source licensing and Chris's licensing and stuff like that. And if that didn't get resolved, I was going to actually drop my support of Thesis, and I was going to move something else over to something else so that I could recommend things that aren't so controversial. But here's the deal: Chris and Matt, I don't think they're going to go out and have a drink or invite each other over to a Super Bowl game here anytime soon. Party. I think that's what you football people do. You invite people over to watch football once a year. I don't know. Anyway, I'm not a sports guy. But the deal is that they did work out the issues, and Chris, kind of changed some things around with his licensing. And that made me very happy because I devoted a lot of time to getting into knowing how to do the things that I want to do with Thesis. And there are a couple of reasons why I'm not even, I was hoping that we wouldn't have to move. Because number one, here's what I want you to do. Go in and say, go to Google and type in this phrase. You don't have to put it in quotes or anything. Just go to google.com and in the search box type in, how do I move the nav menu below header in Thesis? All right. If you need to get that again, go back into, or you can just paraphrase it. You just ask the question however you want. And I guarantee you're going to find probably if you watched the videos that came up, the video blog posts of people giving you little screencasts of how to do that, chances are you're going to find at least 3 to 5, maybe even 6 or 7 hours worth of 5-minute videos that show you exactly how to do that with the various different versions that have existed in the past of the thesis theme. Although some of these things are becoming so easy. And that's how I learned. I actually got into, I purchased the thesis theme, I got the developers option, and I installed it, and I'm like, okay, now how do I do this? And that wasn't completely evident. So I went and I researched, and there are literally thousands of people, and I'm not kidding, it's thousands and thousands of people who are in the thesis theme community. And there's power in community. And I know my good friend, Pastor David, knows there is power in community. And so when you come together and you don't know how to do something, you can get together with other people who are also using that same software. And I'll tell you, the support that you'll get for Thesis is just second to none. Although, my good friends over at Studio Press, they do some really great support as well. But I'm really happy with the Thesis theme. And no, I don't have any plans to check out some other ones. Now, you asked me about Squarespace. Squarespace is a service where you kind of have your hosting and your website all in one. It's kind of like, technically speaking, you've got, you can go to get your Bluehost hosting and you install WordPress and it's kind of all there, and you can adjust and configure your site to kind of look the way you want to with WordPress, with the various themes and all that other stuff. Whereas Squarespace is pretty much, it's all like one big package. You sign in and it's kind of like its own version of its own WordPress, its own content management system software, and it's supposedly real easy to drag and drop and some things over there. Now, I'm not going to sit here and bad talk a service out there, but what I will say is this. How can I put this delicately? I will say it in this way. Squarespace would be great if I was a blogger. I don't know that I would really recommend it for podcasting. I would recommend Squarespace for podcasting about as much as I would recommend WordPress.com and Blogger or Blogspot.com, the blogger blogs. In my mind, the thing is it's relatively expensive compared to some of the other options that are out there. But the deal here is that I don't think you need to pay that much, and I don't think that it gives you enough functionality with all of the different things that come out for WordPress. Sure, you're going to get a site; it's going to have an RSS feed on it, and you can take that to FeedBurner and get the iTunes stuff, but man, there's so many plugins with WordPress that obviously aren't made for Squarespace. And yes, I know Squarespace has modules, and so chances are there might be one or maybe even an option of 2 or 3 different modules for chat, or maybe a different module for this widget or that widget, and you can plug in maybe some HTML widgets and stuff like that. Well, you can plug anything you can plug in an HTML widget into WordPress, but you have WordPress plugins in the thousands, maybe even in the tens of thousands of plugins for WordPress that allow you to tweak and do everything you could ever imagine to your WordPress site. I really believe that WordPress is the most solid platform and the only recommendation I would give for somebody who wanted to operate a podcast. Though, let me say this very clearly, I have some dear friends of mine who are operating podcasts off of WordPress.com, off of Blogger.com, and they are working just fine. They don't have the functionality to do half of the stuff that I do, but that's okay. They have no desire to do those things. They just simply want a site. They want to not have to worry about backups or updates or all of that other stuff, and they're happy with what they have. And I'm happy that they're happy as long as they're producing regular, consistent content, and they are, moving forward in all of those things. So, David, I hope that helps out. We're going to move along here. I'm going to just say that Mike V left a comment on my equipment page. That's right. I have the comments open on one of the pages on my site over there at podcastanswerman.com/equipment. Anyway, he says, I have to ask if podcasting is dead. Does anyone listen to them anymore? Let's see. When there are vibrant and entertaining videocasts to be found everywhere, The reason I ask is I'm interested in podcasting some of the essays I have written, and felt that, he said, I thought that would make for a good vehicle for distribution or exposure. Well, Mike, here's the answer to your question. Yes, podcasting is still alive, and there are millions of people out there who are listening to podcasts. And as far as, wondering, with all that vibrant and entertaining video content out there, well, guess what? Those people are not, except for the extremely dangerous people that you do not want to be on the highway with. Those people, those millions of people who are driving to work every day on their commute, they're hopefully not watching video. Those people that you see jogging and running on the treadmill, a lot of those people with earbuds, you'd think they're listening to workout music. A lot of those people really are listening to podcast content. You got people out there walking their dogs or going for a jog or a long walk through the park, many times listening to podcasts and wanting to make sure that they're looking at what's in front of them so they don't run into a telephone pole. Those people are not watching video either. And so honestly, you've also got an entire crew of people in this world who have mind-numbing jobs that they actually, and I did not mean that to sound like judgmental or anything. But there are people out there who have jobs that require little thought, and instead they're just sitting there data entry. They're reading things off of one screen, putting them on another screen, and they're listening to podcasts all day long while they do it. They're not able to watch video because video is distracting. You got truck drivers out there. So to answer your question, Mike, my suggestion is that if you're looking for an outlet and a distribution channel and exposure for some of your written thought, if you have a good voice that you want to share with the world, then fire up a microphone, record some audio content, and make it available. If you're a really good-looking person and you got a really great setup for high-quality video and you believe you can create one of those vibrant and entertaining video casts, then have at it. There's nothing wrong with that. I'm not against video, although some people get the feeling that I am. I just prefer audio. I just prefer it. So there you go. Let's move on to Adam. Adam's got this question.
Cliff, this is Adam from the show Proudly Resents. I have a website, proudlyresents.com, that's on WordPress. And not only is it for the podcast, but also I put up postings, blog postings, and it gets mixed up in the RSS feed. I was wondering if that's okay, or if there's a way to separate the blog posts and the podcast posts. All right, thanks again, and thanks for updating your logo to your current facial hair. All right, big fan. Thanks for everything.
All right,
again,
thanks, Adam.
What do I do? Can I put the blogs on this?
Okay, we got it. All right, so Adam, thank you for the question. And so your first thing is you started a podcast, and now you've been blogging, and in between your podcast episodes, you've got some blog posts in there, and now this RSS feed is kind of like littered with these blog posts. And if you don't mind, I'm paraphrasing what you said there, and that's kind of the way I think that you're feeling about those blog posts being intermingled with your podcast episodes, as though it might be tainting the pool or something. Well, I am not against mingling your blog posts and your podcast episodes all in the same feed, although I'm going to tell you why I prefer personally to separate them and how to do so. But WordPress, here's the deal. Your main feed, if you have your permalinks set up correctly, you should be able to go to yourdomain/FEED. And that's going to give you your RSS feed, that probably the one that you're talking about. It's your main feed off of your site. And it's going to include any post to any category on your site at any time. So that, or at least, and depending on how many number of items that you choose to display in your RSS feed. And so if you end up doing that, then basically what happens is you will, you'll have them all intermingled there. Now, the reason why and by the way, if you're going to give somebody as an RSS feed to subscribe to your blog, let's just say they're going to check out your blog on a regular basis in, let's say, Google Reader or one of the RSS readers out there, then this is a good thing. That's the feed I would give them, the one that has both the podcast episodes and the podcast episodes and the blog entries, because they're going to be reading your blog, and hopefully your show notes look close enough to a blog post that, if they wanted to quickly glance, they'll be able to get an idea of what you shared in that podcast episode. And if they have a good RSS reader like Google Reader, if there's a media enclosure attached for a podcast, there'll be a player button there. And so they can actually click and play right from Google Reader and listen to your podcast episode. And so it's a great way to get those people who subscribe to your blog listening or interested in your audio podcast. Okay, now with that being said, what about what we send over to iTunes? Why would I prefer to send just a RSS feed with only podcast episodes in it? And the reason is this. Let's just say you set it up to where your RSS on WordPress, if you go into the dashboard, go over on the left-hand side under settings, and then under reading, you'll see how, you got a setting there that talks about how many items that you're going to display in your RSS feed. I think by default it might show, I don't know if it's 3 or 10 or what, I think it's 10. Anyway, you can change that to, let's just say you change it to 50. All right, that would be the first thing I would change it to anyways, is 50. And so let's just say you have 75 podcast episodes that you've done, and you're only showing the recent, you've got it to show only the most recent 50. So when you go into iTunes, they're going to say, hey, this guy has 50 episodes. Well, let's just say 3 weeks ago you started blogging in between podcast episodes, and within the last couple weeks you've done 10 blog posts. Well, when you go to iTunes the next time you release a podcast episode and you look into your listing, it's going to show that you only have 40 podcast episodes available for download. Why? Because your RSS feed, if you have them mixed, your blog posts that do not have a media enclosure are ignored by iTunes, which is good, by the way, because you don't want your blog posts showing up in your in your iTunes listing page and downloading text content. So that's what's going to happen there. So you're not actually getting the full benefit of the number of podcast episodes into that one category, or into the iTunes store, or available for download. If you wanted, 50, you might have to actually continually go in and increase that number. So here's what I do. WordPress automatically gives you an RSS feed for every single category that you create. So and again, this all depends on how your permalinks are set up, but if you were to go to like mydomain.com/category/ and then the slug for your category, or the name of your category /feed, guess what? And I'll just give you an example of this. I think the category that I have set up for Podcast Answer Man on my site is podcastanswerman.com, and I'm going to type this in here as I'm typing it up because I'm pretty sure this is the way it is. podcastanswerman.com/category/podcastanswerman. By the way, if I just stop there, what I'm going to get without typing in the /feed, now I'm actually going to get a category listing of just podcast episodes on my site. So it's not going to show me any blog postings. It's only going to show me the actual category of podcasting, anything that's been put into that category. And now if I go in and just at the end of that and put /feed, now I'm going to get an RSS feed that only includes podcast episodes. And if you have 75 podcast episodes and you told your RSS feeds from WordPress to show the most recent 50, it's going to show the most recent 50 podcast episodes available for iTunes. So my recommendation would be to take your category for podcasting, get the RSS feed just for that category, send that over to FeedBurner, use FeedBurner to make your iTunes or your podcast iTunes compatible and all the other directory compatible. And then, of course, what you would do is submit that on over to iTunes and the other directories like BlackBerry and Zune. So I hope that helps. Yeah, and of course, like I said, for your bloggers, it says, hey, subscribe to the blog. Make sure, just give them the main feed that includes both. All right, so we're going to move on to Chris and Allie. Chris and Allie, I think this is their first call into the show. together
Hey,
anyway.
Cliff.
Hey, Cliff.
I
This
think
is
Chris has
Chris.
called
And this
before.
is Allie.
From the Smorg Show podcast.
The Smorg Show podcast.
And we're calling the podcast Answer Man with a question as we approach our 1-year anniversary of doing a podcast together.
Next week.
Congratulations.
We are wondering how we get our show noticed, given that we don't really have a specific topic or subject that our show revolves around.
It's just kind of a random show with more than one topic that we cover.
Yeah, Smorg is short for smorgasbord, so therefore it's like more of a variety of a type subject matter. We do old-time radio shows, game shows, contests.
Stories, news.
Yeah, so in the iTunes listing, it's listed under comedy, even though it's not all funny. But I'm just having a difficult time because people aren't going to actually search for anything that would bring, like a gardening show or a podcasting. People would type in that subject matter and you could possibly link your show somehow. But how do you get noticed in a situation like ours? You don't even search for smorg.
I know. No one's looking for Smorg.
It's not in anybody's lexicon yet. Anyway, just thought you'd have some ideas, possibly getting listed in some podcast directories, but looking forward to your feedback.
Because after all, you are the podcast answer man.
Thanks, Cliff.
Thanks.
Alrighty, well, thank you so much, Chris and Allie. Congratulations, by the way, on 1 year of podcasting. And what I'm going to recommend to you probably is going to sound really, really crazy to you. And you're going to think, who does this guy think he is? All right, so here's the deal. You've actually pointed out the reason why you may think that you're having some issues growing your audience. And you picked out the two things. Number one, you have a lack of a niche topic, so you haven't really focused down on one specific area that people might be searching for. And you also, you kind of roundabout brought up the issue of branding. So, for example, you're right. There's probably not a lot of people searching for Smorg. So, and not only that, but we'll get to the branding in just a minute. Let me talk about the niche audience for just a moment, because this is interesting because this is how I started out with podcasting. When I started the show, generally speaking, the idea is that the podcast. I called it generally speaking because I didn't think that, I could limit. I didn't want to limit myself to just one topic. I had so many different things that I was interested in. And so it was either going to be faith, it was going to be technology, or it was going to be the TV show Lost. And so I started a show called Generally Speaking, and I was going to generally speak about whatever topic that I was passionate about that particular day. And I learned very quickly that that's not what people want. I'm not saying that general audience shows don't make it, and there certainly are several that do. You've got I don't know that I would personally recommend them, and I honestly I don't listen to them. I think they were probably a little bit more on the explicit side of things. But Dawn and Drew, that's a general audience show. Although I don't know, that might be more comedy than anything. I don't know. I never listened. Anyway. But yes, there are some general shows that'll make it and stuff like that. But there's really the potential for growth happens, I believe, when you really narrow down a focus on a particular topic or area or field of interest. You think I would have learned my lesson when after the first episode of the Generally Speaking podcast, I had people beg me after the second episode of the Generally Speaking podcast, I had people beg me to actually not talk about the other topics in that podcast, but instead do a Lost podcast only, one focused solely on the TV show Lost. And I'm glad I did, because we actually started what we called at that time the weekly Lost podcast. And when we did, our audience size went from, let's say, 50 to 14,000. Okay, so it was huge. Now, of course, I don't think everybody's going to just jump right up to 14,000 these days, and I don't even think I could duplicate, going from 0 to 14,000 over again, unless the circumstances were similar. And of course, the circumstances at that time was the TV show Lost had just been placed in the iTunes store for the very first time. And so you could actually rent the episodes, or you could you could buy the episodes for like $2.99, the day or two after they were viewed on television. And so that had just happened. And not only that, but Lost in the first season, maybe even into the second season, they were playing a lot of music. And so there was people looking for Lost soundtracks to see if there were any available. So they were going to iTunes to search for Lost. And when they pulled up Lost, a search, they showed the podcasts with that name in it. And I was up near the top, right, with some other Lost podcasters. So just because I chose a niche, that audience grew like crazy because people were searching for Lost. They weren't searching for generally speaking. Although I think it's pretty cool. If you were to go to Google right now, just go ahead and do it. Go ahead and type in generally speaking, and go in there and tell me what is the second. Actually, I'm looking here right now. We've got 1, 2 on the front page. The second entry is gspn.tv. We used to be number 1, but the thesaurus kicked us out. And then all the way down at the bottom, I guess that's number 10. There is the Wikipedia article about generally speaking. So, and it looks like, so yeah, right now we're only in 2 places, but still, generally speaking is a pretty big term, and we're still getting some good stuff there. But it's not because of the show, generally speaking, it's because of all the niche podcasting that we've done as a result. I'm going to, and when I told you, my recommendation for you is a consideration of changing your brand, possibly, or adjusting things in a small way. So I'm going to give you an example of just changing your name. All right. Now, again, I don't know if that's something that interests you, but I'm going to give you an example of another podcast. You'd think I would learn my lesson from generally speaking and not call a podcast My Crazy Life, which is, what happened was, generally speaking, that idea where I could talk about anything and everything I wanted. Well, I actually started that as another show, as actually a second show, and I called it My Crazy Life. And I could care less what people thought of the title at the time, because you know what? It's just for me anyway to talk about anything I want to talk that's not Lost related. I wanted to get back to talking about technology and faith and all the other things that were interesting to me, all my other passions. So I started this thing called My Crazy Life, and it was like my daily audio journal. Anything and everything that was on my mind, that's what I'm talking about. Well, I did that podcast, and the only reason that audience grew, and I will say pretty much the only reason. Now, I have learned over the years that there are probably about 15 or 20 people who actually found the show My Crazy Life as one of the shows, which was the first thing that they were introduced to who we are here at gspn.tv. But I'll tell you the reason why they found those is because of the title of the episodes pulled it up in iTunes. So if you want to keep Schmorg's show, make sure that you list the title of your episode. Make sure it's keyword specific for some really highly searched trafficked keywords. But just having it in the title alone, if there are other podcasts out there that have those keywords in the title, they're going to just push you down in the ranks in the search results anyway. But anyway, so I had the show called My Crazy Life, and after several years, and I'm not kidding, several years, and 397 episodes of this podcast, my audience size for that show was only about 200 people. That's it. After several years, okay, and after 397 episodes, that podcast still only had approximately 200 subscribers. And you know what? Every single time I checked out, or I would talk about My Crazy Life and say, hey folks, we listen, I recorded a special episode of My Crazy Life and you should go check it out. And it's like, I had people tell me over and over again, it's like, well, I'm just not interested in a show called My Crazy Life. It's like, who wants to hear about this guy talking about his crazy life? I got my own crazy life to worry about. So what I decided after 397 episodes and after recording that podcast for years is that I was going to rebrand it. And I changed it to Pursuing a Balanced Life. Now, guess what? The format of the show did not change. I still talked about everything that I had been talking about over the last couple of years. The show did not change. That matter of fact, the show didn't change, the topics didn't change. It was still my daily, my regular audio journal of what's going on in my life. Anything I want to talk about that I don't have another podcast for, it's still all the same. But the thing that had changed about me, though, was that instead of just confessing that I have a crazy life, I got very serious about pursuing a more healthy and balanced life. And it's like, you know what? I am going to talk about anything that I'm passionate about, and I'm going to talk about how does this fit into who I am as a person and in my life. And that's really, that's been my pursuit all along. I just never called it that. I never really recognized my crazy life as me sharing my desire to become a more balanced person, a more balanced and healthy human being. And but I'll tell you this, I did after, I think it was I told people in episode 397, I think, that after, when it comes to episode 400, we're going to change the title of this or the name of this podcast to Pursuing a Balanced Life. Well, I didn't wait until episode 400. I think it was either 397 or episode 398. I went ahead and changed the name to Pursuing a Balanced Life. Can I tell you this? Thousands of people subscribe to Pursuing a Balanced Life. Thousands. And we saw the week after I changed the name to Pursuing a Balanced Life, I started to see about 10, 15, sometimes as many as 20 new subscribers every week to that podcast. And here's the situation. When I would get onto the Lost podcast or the Grey's Anatomy podcast or some of these other niche podcasts where people were interested in what we were talking about, and whenever I would say, hey folks, I have another show that I do called Pursuing a Balanced Life, and I did an episode on this topic, I mean, we're talking, we just added 800 new downloads for that episode. Whereas before, when I used to cross-promote my crazy life, we would see maybe an additional 20 or 30 downloads. So there's a lot in a name, a ton in a name. And so I don't know if you're willing after a year to change the Smorg Show to something else. And if not, here's another thing that I can help you out with. Some other ideas to think about and ponder. Well, let's just say Smorg Show is your brand. It's your baby. It's who you are. It was your dream from inception of podcasting. And you really can't imagine after a year investing into this like I did after 3 years and 397 episodes. But let's just say you're just not willing to change it. The Smorg Show is the Smorg Show. It's who we are. Well, if you're not willing to change the name to something that's going to be more appealing and search keyword friendly and just pique the interest of a lot of people. For example, I didn't even know what Smorg stood for until you just told me in this feedback. And I've heard you say, this is Chris from the Smorg Show several times in the past. And I see you send me emails from time to time that says Chris from the Smorg Show, or, and I see it in your email. It's just, Smorg just never piqued my interest. It's like, Smorg Show, okay. But now I know that stands for smorgasbord, and it still doesn't pique my interest. And that's nothing against Chris and Allie. Matter of fact, you've piqued my interest more about your show with your feedback by doing this.
Hey, Cliff.
Hey, Cliff.
This is Chris.
And this is Allie.
From the Smorg Show podcast.
The Smorg Show podcast.
You piqued my interest more about your podcast with that little bit right there, because now all of a sudden it's like, I don't even care what the Smorg Show is. You guys sound like a husband and wife who really are a lot of fun to listen to. You got great audio quality. And I'm like, you know what? I might go check out and see what an episode of the Smorg Show sounds like, just because I would have never guessed that the Smorg Show was a husband and wife duo podcast about whatever. I never would have even guessed it. And I would have just saw the title in iTunes and moved on. So if here's the deal. But let's just say, you're not going to grab me with the you're not going to grab somebody over to the Pursuing a Balanced Life or the Family from the Heart, when nobody knows who Cliff and Stephanie are. So what we found is that when we have a specific topic that we are extremely passionate about, well, then let's podcast about that. So we actually had, when we did the Lost podcast, we gained 14,000 subscribers, automatically. And that went into the tens of thousands over the course of 5 years of podcasting about that show. And then we started the Grey's Anatomy podcast. That immediately, I think the Grey's Anatomy fan podcast immediately jumped up to about 13,000 subscribers. And we had similar responses with the Doctor Who fan podcast and some of these other ones. The thing is, though, is we never did those things. We never actually did those things so that we could grow our audience. we did those things because we were passionate about those TV shows and we wanted to talk about it and we wanted to build relationships and community with the people who would listen. So I want to just go back to the big important key factor in any equation when it comes to how do I do things with my podcast, and it goes back to your motives. All right, what are the motives here? And if your motives are pure and it's about passion and it's about the love for what you're doing, then sure, go ahead. I'll give you another example of a way that recently I did something that was unique. So I was doing a podcast. I've been doing a podcast with Father Roderick Von Hogan. He's a very, very close personal friend of mine, and we were doing the Biggest Loser fan podcast. And The Biggest Loser was on hiatus. And we didn't want to actually stop doing our shows. We enjoyed getting together on a weekly basis to talk about how things are going. And it's just a great time for us to catch up. And so they came out with this thing called Losing It with Jillian Michaels. Or I think that was it. Yeah, Losing It with Jillian Michaels, which was a TV reality show kind of like along the same vein of losing weight and stuff like that with families. And she would move in with their family for a week. And so we knew that would be a popular thing, especially among the people who would also be interested in The Biggest Loser. So what we did is we actually did a series of episodes devoted to Losing It with Jillian. It was still the Biggest Loser fan podcast, but we created a second category because you can put a podcast episode in more than one category. We created a second category on the same website, took that category's RSS feed, and took that to FeedBurner and created a brand new podcast called the Losing It with Jillian Fan Podcast. We gave it its own artwork, but we actually just pulled it from the category. Everything was sent back to the Biggest Loser podcast, but in iTunes, people were searching for Jillian Michaels and Losing It. They were subscribing to those episodes, and we got tons and tons and tons of new subscribers. So on the Smorg Show, you said you talk about comedy. Well, let's create a special name or a brand for your comedy episodes. And every time you have a podcast or something like that that's devoted to that, then you can put it in that feed. But of course, then you've got you're breaking up your brand, watering it down a little bit. I don't know. Personally, my own recommendation, and of course, folks, please listen to this, and especially you and Chris and Allie, don't do what I'm saying just because, you know, I'm only sharing with you my own experience and my own desires and what I would want to do for myself. And I'm just saying, just because I have no desire to do it a different way shouldn't mean that you shouldn't plow your own way through the fields, you know, that are ahead of you, and that you shouldn't plow your own path. Because you maybe want to go down a different path than I do. But I just can't see myself doing this, you know, a show that nobody's searching for. And I don't think that just getting into some other directories that people aren't searching for your keywords is going to help either. I think if anything, if you're not willing to rebrand, if you're not willing to, you know, launch some other shows that definitely will capture an audience so that you can cross promote it and bring those other people and get them interested to who you guys are and then come check out the Smorg Show. If those two options don't work, then what was I going to say? I don't know. Oh, then I would say that, you know, then get out there and start marketing and calling into other shows just like you did here. And hopefully people will hear your guys' voice and they'll just become interested in who you are. Plug yourself into some other communities, build relationships with people online through social networking, and get people to know, like, and trust you through some other means. And hopefully they'll want to come check out a show that has Chris and Allie in it. So I don't know. I hope that that's helpful. But those are the big things. Choose a niche and stick with it, or create some other shows. Rebrand. I don't know. Hopefully that was helpful, and hopefully I didn't just crush anybody's spirit just by saying, you got the wrong brand, because I don't mean to say that. I just have had some experience with generally speaking in my crazy life that has proven that if you rebrand or choose a niche, you're going to find that you'll get a lot further if you're looking to grow your audience. All right, moving along, we have Jonathan Nation. No, actually, yes, we do, but we're going to go to Robert Barnwell first.
Hey, Cliff, this is Robert Barnwell of CEO Talk Radio and CFO Talk Radio, available at robertgbarnwell.com and iTunes. I had a question for the podcast answer man. Given that I recently launched my 2 podcasts, with your considerable help, thank you very much, much of my thinking over the past few weeks and maybe months has been around the subject of branding. And I've been surprised to discover that many of the most important branding elements that I consider so far have been free. Choosing a good name for your podcast, crafting keyword-rich podcast descriptions, selecting a website domain name, the colors that I use on my podcast cover art and website, and similar things. And while many of these might seem relatively obvious to many people, some of the other branding elements are less obvious. For instance, the banner on my website. Initially, I had to answer the questions like, what was the overall image that I wanted to portray on my website and podcast? Did I want it to be authoritative and formal? Did I want it to be informal and personable? And then given that decision, what images and language in my podcasts and on my website best conveyed that message or image. In any event, I realize that the topics I've brought up and identified only touch the tip of the iceberg, so I'm hoping that you'll help me identify some of the other branding-related topics that I and some of the other listeners should consider that maybe we haven't considered up to this point. So what have you learned from your own experience, and given your very impressive network with other internet businessmen and podcasters, what have you learned from their experience as well? Thanks so much, Cliff. I appreciate all you've done to help out me personally and my podcasts and those of the other community members as well. Thanks again. Bye-bye.
All right, Robert, thank you very much for the question. And you actually got most everything that you need to worry about, especially right off the front there. Obviously, we just talked about the name of your podcast. There's a huge difference in the perception of what a podcast is about between My Crazy Life and Pursuing a Balanced Life. So definitely picking the right name for your show is a critical thing. And by the way, I'm all about creating really boring show names. Like the Grey's Anatomy fan podcast. There were other Grey's Anatomy fan podcasts out there before we did ours, and guess what they were called? The McDreamy Show, or I can't remember some of the other things, but they were all so clever that guess what? We trumped them. I mean, when it came to gaining an audience in iTunes, we Trump. What's the word? We stomped all over them in the rankings because we were the Grey's Anatomy fan podcast, and the McDreamy Show and the the whatever other clever and creative names that they came up with. We stomped all over them because people were searching not for McDreamy in iTunes, they were searching for Grey's Anatomy. And so, guess what? There have been podcasts out there all about virtual assistants, and they had things like, your online employee helps, and some creative cleverness. Guess what? Go into iTunes, search for virtual assistant, and then look in the podcast directory, and I bet you're going to find the really boring titled Virtual Assistant Podcast. Podcast answers, hopefully if you type in podcast answers, Podcast Answer Man's going to show up. Help I Got a Mac, hopefully if you're looking for Mac podcast, you're going to see a show called Help I Got a Mac. We have a podcast where we talk about social media. And so we got Social Media Serenity. Your name is so important. Keyword-rich titles and descriptions. So yeah, your RSS feed and FeedBurner, make sure you got your description has lots of keywords in it, that you're using the meta tag keywords, and make sure that when you're on your WordPress blog or the title, for your RSS entry, which if you're using WordPress is your WordPress blog title for your show notes, make sure that title includes those really rich keywords. Your domain name is important. That it doesn't matter that your domain is really long as it's really memorable. Podcast Answer Man is not short. virtualassistantpodcast.com is not short. It's easy to remember, and people can go in and type it is as easy as pie. So getting the right domain is important. I think having a .com is very, very important. And if you actually end up with something like a .tv, like gspn.tv, .tv, then make the .tv a part of your brand. That's exactly what I did. It's in the .tv is the part of the logo. Every time, a lot of people will actually talk about GSPN, but I actually say, every time I talk about GSPN, you hear me talk about GSPN.tv. You may ask yourself, well, why on Twitter do you have twitter.com/GSPN? Because they don't allow a dot in there. And so that's why I chose that. And, and then you talked about artwork. Your artwork is vital. Before people even see the title of your show, sometimes they'll discount what the title of your show is. They won't even look and read it if your artwork is not something that is attractive to them. So in iTunes searches, your artwork is extremely important. And, you talked about the message and what you're trying to get across and how do you convey that. You hit all the big things there. The only one that I think you missed, Robert, and this is the one I'm going to give to everybody, relationships in capital letters. Relationships and the one other, actually, so I'm going to give you two more. Online presence. People should, a part of your brand should, if you want to do things the way that's made, that's brought a lot of success to the network of shows that I have, it's about the relationships I have. It's not just the content. It's like, wow, Cliff and Stephanie, they're a lot of fun to get to know. They really are approachable. They have this amazing community. They interact with you online, and if you email them, you're going to get a response. And then online presence, have your own website, but man, be in Twitter, be in LinkedIn, be in Facebook, and have those places out there where your target audience exists, and not just have a presence, but engage in relationships with those people. Jonathan, I'm going to put your comment on to next week, and hopefully I won't forget to put it in next week. But I appreciate you calling in. We'll get to that one next week. But anyway, I want to wrap the show here by sharing with you some things that are going on for me, because hopefully that's okay with you guys. If you guys are sick and tired of hearing me promote my stuff, then go ahead and hang up or stop the thing here and tune in next week. But I do want to promote at least two things that I'm doing. I want to let you know the WordPress for Podcasters webinar series. This is where I basically take somebody who has no hosting account and you have no WordPress installation, no knowledge of WordPress at all, but you want to learn how to take that and turn it to sign up for a hosting account, install WordPress, basically configure it, learn about you heard me talk about permalinks. I show you how to set the permalinks up. I actually explain to you what they are and why they're important. I actually show you how to configure all the little bits of settings and stuff here and there, all the plugins that you'll need, and certainly nothing more than what you need. And then, of course, I show you how to configure it. It's all step-by-step, video after video. There are a total of 8 videos in the session. It is less than one. It's actually right now, currently 1/3 the cost of hiring me one-on-one. Completely just updated this. It's available over at podcastanswerman.com/products. That's WordPress for podcasters. In fact, somebody who called me yesterday says, hey, I've got WordPress. I understand WordPress, but I just don't know how to set up this RSS feed and these plugins. And I said, I'll tell you what, get WordPress for podcasters, and you just don't need to watch video number 1 or 2. All right, you'll just go down through video 3 through the rest, and it'll answer everything you need to know. WordPress for podcasters over at podcastanswerman.com/products. And hey, here's the big one. I want to let you know I am going to be doing that 5-week training session in March. I've already got 4 people signed up. I need 20 to make sure that I can devote all the time in February to prepare for it and all the time in March to carry it off. So here's the deal. It is a 5-week program. I am going to tell you next week what all is included in it, because there's going to be a lot. It's going to be a ton. But it's only $800. And here's the situation. If you're a podcaster and you have people out there listening in your audience who are interested in podcasting, and you think you might be able to convince some people to sign up for this thing, I'm going to create, it's not going to be like a easy to do affiliate. I'm going to do an unofficial affiliate thing here, although it's going to be official. Here's the situation. Anybody that you get to sign up for my 5-week course, I will pay you a commission of $150. So that's right. Basically what happens is you get them to sign up, And what I would recommend that you do is you basically have them contact you for more information. You would then refer them on to me, and I'll take it from there. And if they're on the fence, I'll try to get them to sign up. And if they sign up at the end of March, so basically right around the first week in April, as long as they've paid for the full course in April, I'm going to be paying out $150 for each person that you would recommend to my 5-week training. So there you go. If you're interested in that, email me with any questions, cliff@podcastanswerman.com. Until next time, I encourage you to join the community.